Hi 9H. This is a video about how to do the mini research paper, which is the next paper you're going to do. It's never easy doing a research paper, even though yours is a very short one. And the reason it's not easy is because there are a lot of rules to follow that must be followed precisely. And that you'll see as I go through this presentation. First of all, what is a research paper? Well, a research paper is usually a persuasive essay with proof of your thesis, which includes proof from other sources. Even though this is a really good definition, sometimes if I'm writing a research paper, it's not quite this way, although it's close, but we're not going to have to deal with that because you are writing a research paper that's a mini research paper where it is just going to be a persuasive essay with proof from research. If you were going to the movies and you wanted to argue that you should see some movie, at that point, you could be giving your opinion, and certainly you could express your point of view of why you want to see that movie. But if you really want to convince someone why they should see that movie, what you might add is, according to the guy at Newsday, or according to my Uncle Stanley, or anything like that, which would not only make your opinion seem more valid, but would show that you have more of an argument than people who are making another argument. Well, your paper is just going to be a practice research paper. And by that, I mean most research papers are a lot longer. But this research paper, even though it's short, will allow me to see if you understand and can use the various rules that you need to know for a research paper. Well, your paper, and I'm going to be going into this very specifically, is a 6-paragraph essay. It's going to have an introduction, that's paragraph 1. It's going to have your first reason defending your thesis, which is paragraph 2. It's going to have your second reason for defending your thesis, which is paragraph 3. It's going to have still another paragraph that gives a third reason. And all of these are going to be backed up by research. Now, of course, it's really important also that you have another paragraph, and this would be your 5th paragraph, which is counterargument. And we'll get into that sooner or later. And then, of course, as is the case with any paper, unless you're told not to, you should include a conclusion. So there we have our 6 paragraphs: introduction, reason number 1, reason number 2, reason number 3, counterargument, and conclusion. So you can see the similarities with a persuasive essay, because in a persuasive essay, you're giving reasons. Again, the difference here is that it's not just that you're giving the reason, but you're bringing in backup information to support your reasoning. Well, the good news, as I've put on this slide, is that you really have already done the research, at least most of you. And if you have to do additional research, it won't be that painful. So really, this is really just a persuasive essay where you already have your research because you did your oral presentation, which was a form of persuasion anyway. Yes, you can and should use the material you found for that oral presentation. That means that as you prepared your oral presentation, I asked you to look up things that would support your reason. And if you had 3 reasons, you had sources that supported each of those 3 reasons. That's, again, going to be very similar to what you're writing now. One of the ways you'll save a little bit of time is by making your thesis the same as the one you used for your oral presentation. After all, you have that thesis already. All of you wrote it down, and that is what you're going to try to prove in this research paper. So it's going to be the exact same thesis. Where is that going to be? Well, that is going to be, and I'm going to repeat this because it's important, that thesis should be at the end of your intro. We're going to go more specifically into introductory paragraphs, but for now, know and keep this in mind. Your thesis is the last sentence or sentences of your introduction. Well, your body paragraphs will be built around the three reasons you used in the oral presentation. All of you had three supporting arguments that said that your thesis was valid. Well, each of your body paragraphs, except for the counter argument, which is slightly different, is going to be built around each of those reasons that you gave in your oral presentation. And those will become the core of each of the three body paragraphs. So it's really, again, not a matter of looking up or thinking up new things to present. You have your thesis, you already have your three arguments. Now, your counter argument, which all of you also had in your oral presentation, will be a separate body paragraph. And you can borrow from your partner, or certainly you can use what you had in your slideshow and use that counter argument. So almost all of the preliminary work is really done for you because you did it yourself. Okay, here I'm going over the first paragraph, which, as you know, is the introduction. As I've said before, just a few minutes ago, the intro ends with the thesis. Please don't experiment. It really is important that your thesis be the very last section, could be one sentence, could be two, of the introductory paragraph. Now, how do you develop something? Because you're not just writing down your thesis. I want you to do a more full-bodied introduction. So what you can do is keep in mind that an introduction that's standard, that's pretty, I hate to say formulaic, but it is, and a good way to start is to have a general statement which gets narrower and narrower and narrower till it lands on the thesis, which is very specific. That's why the first sentence of your intro is really the most general sentence. And what will happen there is you've got to use your imagination. And what you do is you say, well, I have to land on, I have to end with the thesis. So, how do I start with a more general statement and little by little, sentence by sentence, narrow it down so it logically lands on the thesis? Now, this requires some thinking. There's no doubt about it. And that's where your work does come in. But every sentence must lead to the thesis, which is the last sentence or sentences of your intro. It's really something you should plan ahead. How am I going to wind up in this narrowed statement of the thesis? And the best way is to start with a very general statement, get a little more specific, then a little more specific, till finally you get to the thesis. I'm going to present you with this triangle, which illustrates, at least in visual terms, what I'm talking about. Notice the top of the triangle is the part that's widest, and notice the part at the bottom of the triangle, at least the way this is constructed, is the most specific. That specific part, that bottom end of the triangle, represents your thesis. And if you notice, the beginning of the paragraph is wider. It covers a more ground, but you do have to wind up with the thesis. And you notice the triangle is one figure. It's not just a bunch of disparate parts, separate parts. It must be, it must have continuity. So I'm giving you this inverted triangle, which is a good way to really look at this symbolically. And again, general to specific, general to the thesis. Let me give you some more minor tips about the introduction. First of all, needless to say, it's really better if it's interesting. Don't just go back to the most formulaic kind of introductory sentence where you just state something either that's so obvious or really so boring to read that it doesn't intrigue the reader so you can go further. It does require thought. Now, you know the basic formula again, general to specific, general to thesis, but you've got to get there. And in order to get to the thesis, you know, you really should be intriguing the reader by doing it in an interesting way. This sentence order also must be logical. And that means that you can't skip around. You're going to make it flow. And the way you're going to make it flow is to think in advance, how am I going to get to the thesis? Well, one thing you could do to make it flow, as you know, is to use transition. And transition, generally speaking, is a way to connect paragraphs, but also, as is the case here, a way to connect sentences. And what you're doing, and many of you are very, very good at this, you're using some kind of connection by constructing the sentences so that the previous sentence is one that naturally leads into the next sentence. Usually, in fact, almost inevitably, the transition will be in the second sentence of a two-sentence pair. What does that mean? It means you have sentence one, and then you start sentence two with transition. You go through sentence two, and now at the end of sentence two, you're going to look at it and you're going to start sentence three by putting in transition. And a lot of you are very, very good with that. And again, remember the triangle, but I've repeated that a bunch of times. And again, every sentence must connect to the previous sentence. The human brain fills in the dots, so to speak, but you must give it guidance to fill in the dots. So what you've got to do is think ahead of time. How am I going to make it a logical progression? You can't do this in a matter of 30 seconds. You really need to think in advance. My general comment would be that you shouldn't have quotes or facts in the intro, but you certainly could. I could show you some intros where there's a quote in the middle of it where the intro really has this fact, but it fits in so well in the way you're going from the general to the specific. So again, I want you to keep in mind that you're really not doing a completely new kind of paper where you're starting from the beginning. You've done the research. You've already developed your thesis. You've already developed your reasons. So you have all the material, but you know that you're going to have to flesh this out, which means that you obviously have to add more than just the skeleton, which you had on your slides. And it was appropriate there to just have bullets with skeletal points. So I'm going to stop here. You might want to listen to this again, but after this, I'll be going through more aspects of how to do this mini research paper that I've assigned to you. So again, don't be particularly scared of the work. It'll all come through to you, the stuff that you did on the presentation. See you next time.